Welcome back to the You Can Too podcast. I'm your host, James Bracken, and in today's episode, I'll be helping you overcome your fear of failure. Now, if you are not already, please go give me a follow on Instagram at JamesBrackenIV, and be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a future episode. And if you've listened to this podcast and you've enjoyed it, leave me a rating and review on Spotify. It helps me reach more people. I'm able to help more people in the process. And if you want to start your week off with more intention and more mindfulness in less than 60 seconds, you can get that down below in the show notes. Without further ado, let's hop into this one. Most people in the world have a fear of failure. They fear not being good enough. They fear not being worthy enough. They fear not being capable enough. They fear not knowing if it's the right time, not having everything figured out. And I just want to put this into perspective for you. This is going to be a real perspective shift for you kind of podcast. Because a question that I always ask myself that has really changed the direction of my life is, will I regret not doing this at the end of my life? And the reason I say not doing this instead of doing this is because most of the time, we don't take action on things that deep down we want to take action on. But there's a fear there. There's a fear if I'm not good enough, I don't have it. Whatever that fear is, I want to put this into perspective for you. At the end of your life, there's going to be a lot more things that you wish you did do than things that you did do and failed at. Because at the end of the day, failure is not the opposite of success. It's a part of success. It's not something that's final. It's not something that's going to stop you in your tracks and completely keep you where you are. The only thing that is going to keep you where you are is not taking action. Because that risk of failure is just something that's a part of the process. It's not something to avoid, but it's something to seek. Because that failure is feedback. It's one of the most information-rich sources in the world. Like, if you really think about it, the only way we can improve is if we fail. And I think that the education system really messed this up because in life, when we fail a test, we feel that we are the failure. And that's where most of that fear of failure comes from, is we associate our self-worth with that failure. But at the end of the day, it's not. But when we think it is, then we avoid it. When we see it as feedback, then we seek it. And so I wanted you to ask yourself, what's the consequence of not taking action? What's the consequence of not taking the risk? What's the consequence of not going towards what you truly want to go towards in life? Because that fear of failure will stay with you your entire life if you let it. But if you start to seek it, you start to change your mindset around what failure really is, as I see it as feedback, I start to seek it. I start to want to go towards it, because if I fail, then I'm learning. If I'm not failing, there's no learning experience there. There's so much information that we need to find within that failure. And if we don't ever seek it, we'll always avoid it. We'll always be paralyzed in where we are, and we'll never take action on the things that truly feel aligned with us in life. When I was 17 years old, I invested into a coaching program that was $7,500. I didn't have $3,000 in my bank account. And the reason I bring that up is because I wasn't thinking about my fear of failure. What I was thinking about was the impact that it could have on other people. And when you start to take yourself out of the equation, or your identity of who you think you are, of what that would look like if you fail, of what other people are going to think, and you stop thinking about what other people are going to think, but you think of what the impact that you can have on other people is, it starts to seem a lot less strenuous to fail, because you're thinking about other people and not yourself. If you think about it, let's put this into perspective. One of the biggest fears in the world is public speaking, right? And it's really close to dying, funny enough. It's weird. It's crazy, because we all have this fear. But when we think about it, the people that go on stage are not thinking about themselves. Their fear of failure may still be there, but they're not thinking about themselves. If they're thinking about themselves, that's when anxiety pops up. That's when the fear of imposter syndrome comes up. That's the fear of I don't have all the things figured out. I don't know if I'm capable of doing this. Shows up when they're thinking about themselves, when their ego is right in the way. But the people that succeed in speaking, for example, are thinking about the audience. What kind of impact do I want to have on the audience? There was times where, for this podcast, I was fearful of having people on the show, people that I really looked up to. And what I thought about was, well, I can't be fearful of having a conversation with one person, because I'm thinking about what kind of impact I want to have on my audience. And so when you take a step back and you take yourself out of the equation and you start thinking about the impact that you can make, whether it's on your life or someone else's life, the fear doesn't seem so scary. It doesn't seem so big. It doesn't seem so monstrous, because we're thinking long term. Like this, most of the fear of failure happens because we're thinking about what other people are going to think of us. We're thinking of what it's going to entail with a week from now. But we have these short time horizons that really don't put it into perspective. We start to see it as final. We start to see it as this identification with myself. We start to see that this failure is an association with my self-worth because that's what we are taught in school. If I fail a test, I am a failure. But at the end of the day, it's not that. If we start to see failure as feedback, as a part of success, not the opposite of it, we start to seek it. We start to realize, well, wow, there's a lot of information I can learn from this. There's a lot that I can take from this failure because it's helping me grow. It's helping me learn. It's helping me take the next step, knowing that I don't have everything figured out, that I don't have all the answers, that I'm not ready, but I'm going to do it anyway because that's the only way I'm going to learn. That's the only way I'm going to grow. That's the only way I'm actually going to progress. So I take this, I say this because if you're not failing, you're not winning. If you're not failing, you're not moving forward. If you're not failing, you are not learning. And the only way to actually make progress in life is to fail. If you think about it, if you're not failing, you can win as much as you want, but are you learning? You may have the innate talent, but those that don't take action don't really grow. And so I put this into perspective for you because I want this to change your perspective on failure. I want you to think about at the end of your life, will you regret not doing the thing that you're thinking of doing right now? And it's like that answer is yes. So take yourself out of the equation, take everyone else out of the equation, and just think, if I didn't identify with the failure, if other people weren't a part of the equation, if I was in a world just by myself with no one else around and it was just me, would I do the thing? It's likely that the answer is yes. And so the fear of failure doesn't seem so monstrous when you take everything else out of the equation. You look at it from 10,000 feet and you're like, well, shoot, I probably would do that thing. It probably wouldn't be so scary. Probably wouldn't hold me back. Probably wouldn't paralyze me. Because that fear is this: false evidence appearing real. It's an idea. That fear, that thought of fear of what's going to happen if this happens, it's just a thought. It's not truth. But we can feel as though it's true because our nervous system doesn't know the difference between what is real and what is imagined. And so if we feel as though something's going to happen before it even happens, we can feel those emotions. That anxiety, that paralyzed feeling can happen before we even take action on doing the thing. And so we have to think about, like, well, what is the best possible outcome? Instead of thinking about what's the worst possible outcome and catastrophizing the whole thing, let's think about what's the best possible outcome if this turns out. Like, if everything were to go great, what could happen? With this podcast, with my coaching business, like, I wasn't thinking like, shoot, what if I fail? Now I was thinking like, shoot, what if I like change my life? And within 2 years I did. I have a top 1.5% podcast. I'm helping people change their lives. I'm helping people grow their businesses because I was thinking not about myself, but I was thinking about what could I do? What could be possible? What kind of impact could I have on other people? So I want to take this and really put this into perspective for you. At the end of your life, will you regret not doing the thing that you're thinking about doing right now? So I hope this put this into perspective for you. I hope that the thing that you're fearing right now becomes a little bit smaller for you. I hope you take one small step towards overcoming that thing that you're fearful of. I hope it changed your perspective on fear, of failure, of what that's going to entail for your life. And you really take a long-term view of what could happen if everything were to turn out better than you could possibly imagined. Because your life can change when you start facing the things that you fear. Because that fear of failure is just that, a false evidence appearing real. It's not truth. It's an idea that you create in your mind. And when you start to realize that that fear is that's feedback, it's a part of success, not the opposite, you start to seek it. And you start to realize that there's a lot that you can learn from failure. And that it's just a part of life. And if you avoid it, you'll always stay exactly where you are. I hope this podcast gave you some clarity on that thing that you're fearing right now. Hope it changed your perspective just a little bit. Maybe it made that fear just a little bit smaller and you take one small step towards overcoming it. Because I guarantee you, your life will change when you do. I appreciate you for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode.